Good morning, students. In last class, we have discussed the ecological pyramids. We can have discussed energy flow as well as the ecological pyramids we have discussed in the last class. Now coming to the next one, that is we can call as ecological succession. So here, what is an ecological succession? Means the gradual and fairly predictable changes which are taken place in an area is called as the ecological succession. That is a gradual and fairly predictable changes taken place in an predictable changes taken place in an area is known as the ecological succession. Ecological, we can call that as the ecological succession. So here this ecological succession, that is a gradual and fairly predictable changes. That means here firstly there is no an ecosystem. When the ecosystem is not formed, here there is no organisms which are present in this area. So what happens means here gradually the species population is taken place where it helpful for the formation of in an area and an ecosystem formation is taken place. So such changes which is taken place in an area, so such condition, such a process we can call as an ecological succession. We can use the word as an ecological succession. Otherwise, here a natural process by which a different group of communities colonized the same geographical area over a period of a time in a definite sequence, we can call as an ecological succession. That means in a natural area, here a different group of communities, a group of communities in an ecosystem at a geographical area. Here what happens, their communities are gradually increased. So when increasing, here what happens, here the definite sequence of organisms are developed and the formation of an ecosystem formation is taken place where in a natural and habitat. That means here in a natural process, it is a type of a natural process by different communities in an geographical area. Here geographical an area at a period of time in a definite sequence, these formation is taken place. Then we can call as the ecological succession. Example, if you see in here how the ecosystem is taken place. For example, if you taken place a reservoir. So here reservoir means a newly constructed reservoir. In this reservoir there is no an ecosystem. So gradually what happens here, the first the lichens or formations are taken place. From lichens here it formation of a bryophytes. From bryophytes here it formation of the small trees or formations. So here likewise here from this an ecosystem, here it forms bryophytes. From bryophytes it forms a small and herbaceous plants. From herbaceous plants here it forms to the and large trees or ecosystems or formations. So here likewise here it is taken place, that means in a newly constructed pond here the organisms, that means here ecosystem formation is taken place. That is an example where we can taken place, that is an example, or in we can taken place a bare rocks, or otherwise a bare rocks, or otherwise a newly cooled lavas, or otherwise a newly created pond or reservoir we can taken place for the an ecological association, where here a gradual and fairly a predictable changes. That means gradually the changes are taken place. Here at a time, here all organisms are not by formation. Here gradually the organisms are produced and forms an ecosystem. So such type of changes which is taken place in an area at over a period of time, this process we can call as an ecological associations. So in these ecological associations here will be in ecological association will may be having the composition of structures and communities changes in response to changing environmental conditions. That means here in the composition the community structures are taken place. So in this, when community structures are forming here, the first formed species, the first formed species we can call as the pioneer species. Pioneer species means the first formed species. From the pioneer species here, the transitional, it develops into a transitional species or transitional communities. It forms into a transitional communities. From transitional communities here it forms into a climax communities or climax species. Here it is taken place. That means here the first formed species we can call as a pioneer species, and later here it develops the communities, the transferring of the communities in several communities we can call them as the transitional communities. Later that all communities are formed. Here the climatic species, that means what are climax means the ending species, what are the end species are presenting, end for the ecological association. So such type of species we can call them as the climatic species. That means here a climax means all the changes leads to the final. That means what are the changes are taken place which becomes into a final stage. This means here the final stage of the species. Final stage of a species, then we can call that as the climatic species. We can call them as the climatic species, where here it becomes an equilibrium, near to an equilibrium in the environment. That means when this climax species are formed, when the climax species are formed here, it becomes an equilibrium. It becomes an equilibrium to an environment. So when they becomes an equilibrium to the environment, then such type of species, where the final stage of species which becomes an equilibrium to an environment, so such type of species we can call them as the climatic species. And also here the entire sequence of communities, successfully changed in a given area. The entire the entire sequence of communities, the entire sequence of communities, the entire sequence of communities in an area is called as a Sira. Siri, we can call them as a Siri. What is a Siri means? The entire sequence of communities, the entire sequence of communities successfully changed. That is, successfully changed in an area, we can call them as a series. And here the individual transitional communities, the individual transitional species we can call as serial communities, serial communities. Here what are serial communities means? Here the individual transitional species which are presenting, we can call them as serial communities. We can call them as serial communities are stages. Serial stages, we can call them as serial communities or serial stages, we can call them as. So here in an successful serial changes, there is change in a diversity of a species of organism. So increase the number of species and total biomass. That means in an ecological succession, here the number of individuals, the species are increased, and also the biomass also will be increasing. Then where here it forms the pioneer species, transitional species as well as community species. So here the number of individuals are gradually increased, and also increasing the number of biomass in an organism from lichens. If you take in place a newly constructed pond, here we'll have in a pond we can take in place phytoplanktons, zooplanktons. From zooplanktons, here it forms into small trees, herbs, shrubs. Later it develops into trees. So that here entire that is developed. So here that is here the biomass of the organisms are gradually increased, increasing the number as well as the increasing the biomass of an organism also will be taken place. So such type of we can call them as an ecological successions. So here this ecological succession the ecological succession is classified into two types. The ecological succession types of ecological succession. So here the ecological succession is classified into two types. What are that means? First one is called as primary succession. A primary succession, and second one is the secondary succession. So here these are classified. The ecological succession is classified into two types. What are that means? The first one is the primary succession, and the second one is the secondary succession. So here primary succession means here the succession starts, there is no organisms are there. That means here there is no organisms. Here what happens, here the succession is starts where no living organisms are there. Here as the succession will start, the succession is starts where no organisms are there. No organisms are not, that means here no organisms are not presenting, but here gradually what happens, here increase the development of an ecosystem, a development is taken place, then we can call that as the primary succession. These would be areas where there is no living organisms are existed. That means here in primary successions, there is no organisms are not presenting, that is no existence of species are not be presented. Gradually, here the species are gradually increased and helpful for the development of an ecosystem. So that we can call such type of ecological succession, we can call as the primary ecological succession. That means it can be defined, there is no living organisms in the areas, but gradually they increase the environment, then such condition we can call them as the ecological succession. Example, we can take bare rocks, example, bare rocks, and also here cooled lava, and a newly constructed a pond or the reservoir. So here the reservoir, that means here these are an example where means a newly, that is bare rocks. That bare rocks means here there is no area, there is no organisms are present in these areas, or cooled lavas are newly constructed. That means here no organisms are not be presenting, but gradually they increase their number to form an ecosystem. Then such type of ecosystem or ecological succession we can call as the primary and ecological succession. And here secondary, if you see in a secondary succession, the successions that are start areas somehow lost of living organisms that are existed. That means in this ecological succession, here the succession will start. The succession will start where the organisms are lost or disturbed in an areas. Then here what happens in this area, they are presenting but they are disturbed or they losing. So due to the losing of these, what happens here, the destroying of a natural biological communities, we are able to destroying here. So when destroyed the biological communities, so here this type of succession we can call as the secondary successions. Example, we can take place as an agriculture land, or we can example it taken place agriculture land, cut forests. So here cut forest or burn forest, cut forest or burn forest. So here these are an ecological succession where it takes place the secondary. That means already they are presenting, the species are presenting, but they are disturbed or lost or disturbed or destroyed. The newly that is biological community was built disturbed, so by the activities. So such type of succession we can call as the secondary succession. That is here agriculture land. That means when agriculture is completed, one crop is over, you are able to cutting. Again newly that is grown and helpful for producing an ecosystem development will be taken place. Or otherwise when you cut the forest, here when a deforestation is taken place, again the crops will be taken place. And burn, if a fire is taken place, it is totally destroyed. Again after destroying, again the species will be, accumulation of a species will be taken place. Then such type of succession we can call as a secondary succession. So here the secondary succession is far than the better than the primary succession. That means here why is the secondary succession is far better than the primary succession means here in the secondary succession already the species are presenting, but they are disturbed. But in primary there is no species, that means there is no ecosystem or there is no living organisms are not present in the areas. They have newly developed. So to newly developed, here what happens, here it takes more time when compared to the secondary section. In secondary section already the species are presenting, but they are disturbed. So due to disturbing, again the species will return to their positions and helpful for the formation of an ecological succession formation will be taken place. So that here the secondary succession is better than the primary successions. And also here if you see in here there are the succession in plants. There are two type of the successions are presenting in a plants. One is based on the nature of the habitat. Based on the nature of the habitat, based on the habitat, the ecological successions are classified into two types. One is called as xeric succession, xeric succession, and hydroc. Second one is hydroc succession. Here that is hydroc succession or xeric succession. Here in xeric succession means this is taken place in a dry lands, dry place where the water is not be taken place. From the dry places, here this will move towards the mesic conditions. Mesophytic conditions or mesic conditions are taken place. Likewise in hydric succession also, here from water medium, from water to the mesophytic conditions, it takes place, the mesophytic conditions are taken place. So such we can call as xeric. Xeric means here this is the ecological succession is taken place in dry places, in desertic conditions. If it is taken place in desertic conditions, we can call as xeric succession. If the succession is taken place in a hydric condition, that is taken place in water, it is in desertic conditions, desertic conditions, and it is in the water. So here the ecological succession is taken place in desertic conditions. We can call that as a xeric succession, where it takes place from dry plants to the it leads to the mesophytic conditions are taken place. Likewise in hydroc succession also, the succession which is taken place in water we can call as hydroc succession. So here from hydroc, that is from the water, it passes to the formation of a mesophytic, an ecosystem is a formation. That is in xeric or hydric conditions, the main condition is it helpful for the formation of mesic conditions are taken place, that will be taken place in xeric as well as the hydric conditions, where we can taken place. An example for this is a xeric succession example and the hydric conditions. For example, if we taken place hydric hydric conditions, here they are firstly the formation of phytoplanktons to the zooplanktons. From zooplanktons it forms into the zooplankton, it forms into the submerged plants. Here it forms into submerged plants. From submerged it develops into merged plants, that is it develops into the submerged free floated plants. Submerged free floated floating plants. That means here if it's taken place here from free floated to the reed, that is it's taken place reed swamp stages, last marsh meadow stages, shrubs, trees, and climatically it forms into the forest. So if we taken place an example here, I will explain detail in this hydrock succession. Hydrock succession, where here it takes place. First one is the phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons leads to the zooplanktons. Zooplanktons to the submerged plants. Next, reed plants, reed swamps, and marshy swamps. Here later the herbs, later it forms into shrubs. Later climax it is forms into trees. From trees here it forms into trees. In trees climax, lastly the climax is the forest ecosystem formation, forest and ecosystem. So this is where how it is taken place in xeric. That means it takes place in water and leads to the mesophytic condition, that is forest ecosystem is a formation. This is the sequence how the hydrox succession, likewise in xeric conditions also will be taken place. This is the two types of the based on the habitat. The ecological succession is classified into two types. One is xeric and hydrox. Xeric means the succession which is taken place in desertic condition. From desertic it leads to the mesophytic conditions. Later hydric succession it is taken place in water. From water it leads to the mesophytic where and forest ecosystem will be taken place. An example, this is an example where we can taken place in an ecological successions. Next, coming to the an ecological, that is the ecological cycles. Next, coming to the nutrient cycles. Next one is nutrient cycles, or otherwise we can call them as the biogeochemical cycles. So here are nutrient cycles. So here in this topic we will study nutrients. That means these are it is a psychological movement of organic and inorganic chemicals between living organisms and an environment. That is the cyclical changes. The cyclical changes that is organic to inorganic substances changes inorganic to inorganic substances to living organisms in a living organisms to the environment. Living organisms to the environment, from environment to living organisms. So this process, that means recycling of organic substances from environment or from organism to the environment, from environment to the organism, this cycling changes we can call as nutrient cycle, or otherwise it is called as biogeochemical. It means bio means living, geo means earth, chemical, that means the chemicals which are present in living organisms that are entered into the environment, again from the environment that are entered into the living organisms. So this cycle we can call as the biogeochemical cycles. We can call that as the biogeochemical cycles. So these cycles are classified into two types. These are classified into two types. One is gaseous cycles. Gaseous cycle and sedimentary cycle. Here gaseous cycle means the cycle, that means cyclical changes of organic substance from living organisms to environment, from environment to an atmosphere. If the changes are taken place from environment living to the living organisms to environment, that is into the atmosphere, then we can call this as the gaseous cycles. Example we can take place as the nitrogen cycle, the nitrogen and the carbon cycle. And the sedimentary cycle, sedimentary means here the environmental to the earth surface. If the nutrients are passing from living organisms to the earth's surface. So here in the form of sediments, then this cycle we can call as the sedimentary cycle. Example we can take in place as the phosphorus and the sulfur. So these are the cycles where atmosphere, that means gaseous cycle means the cycles are the living organisms, that is nutrients which are passing from living organisms to the atmosphere, that is passing after decomposition of the living organisms or plants and animals, or that are decomposed by the organisms, again that nutrients are passes to the atmosphere, then with such condition we can call as a gaseous cycles. So here nitrogen and carbon cycle we can take in place, and sedimentary from living organisms to the earth surface, that means they are deposited on the earth surface in the form of sediments. If they are presenting, then we can call them as the sedimentary cycle, that is phosphorus and the sulfur are the an example for the sedimentary cycle. And here in this carbon we will study about one is carbon cycle, and second one is the phosphorus cycle. We will discuss one is the carbon cycle and second one is the phosphorus cycle. So here a carbon cycle, we know that the carbon is a most an important cycle where it is reservoir, that is here it is an example for gaseous cycle where that is atmospheric air is an reservoir. So here in the carbon cycle, here the carbon is a reservoir of the air, where here the carbon is presenting in human body. Here in human body, the for 99% of in the human body, the weight of the human body, 99% the weight of the human body, in organisms, sort of 49% of the weight is the in organisms. Organism is mainly due to the carbon only, and here will having the 71% is found in dissolved in the oceans and seas, and only 1% is presenting in the an atmosphere, that is 71% is present in oceans and seas, and only 1% is present in the an air in the form of the air in the an atmosphere. And also here in our body we are able to get, that means totally annually we are able to get the carbon into the biosphere, that is 4.4 into 10 to the power of 13 kilograms, that is we are able to get 4 into 10 to the power of 13 kgs of the carbon is carbon produced in the biosphere, that is total in the earth, that is biosphere means on the earth we are able to get 4 into 10 to the power of 13 kg of carbon we are producing per annual means for 1 year we are able to get 4 into 10 to the power of 13 of kgs produced into the an atmosphere. And also here through the a large amount of carbon is produced in the form of the respiration, by the plants and animals, So here we are able to get the more amount will be produced in the form of plants and animals we are able to produce, that is carbon is produced into the atmosphere by the form of the respiration. And also here by the decomposition also, that means the organisms, the decomposition, by the decomposition also the air that carbon is enters into the an air, again that is passes from the living by the process of photosynthesis, again that carbon is taken place by the plants, and again that is utilized by plants for the preparation of food materials, again that is directly or indirectly that is passes to the animals, again when they are decomposed that are passes again into the an atmosphere. And also here in the form of fossil fuels, the fossil fuels also, that is like coal, petrol and diesel are from these burning of these, the carbon also will releases, that is enters into the atmosphere in the form of a fossil fuels. So here the carbon cycle we can call as a complete cycle. Why you can call as a carbon cycle as a complete cycle means why you can call as the carbon as a complete cycle means here carbon we can call as a complete, you can call as a complete cycle. Complete cycle means here totally it is enters into the atmosphere either by the decomposition of plants and animals or by the fuels, by the fossil fuels, by the fossil fuel, by coal, petrol or diesels, by burning of these, that totally will enters into the atmosphere. From atmosphere again it reaches to the living organisms. There is no reservoir, there is no resource into the, and that means these are not present in the earth's surface. That is totally burn and enters into the air only. So that we can call as a complete a cycle. We can carbon we can call as a complete a cycle. So that is main, that is cycle of the carbon. Next, coming to the phosphorus cycle. Coming to the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus cycle. So here phosphorus cycle we can call as a sedimentary cycle. A sedimentary cycle. Why means this is some amount of the phosphorus is deposited in the form of an earth crust. A crust in the form of bones or in the form of teeth, bones. These in the form of are in the form of sedimentary soil or in the form of the sedimentary rocks. The sedimentary in the form of sedimentary rocks. This will be deposited. So that here we can call as a sedimentary cycle, and also the phosphorus cycle we can call as incomplete. We can call as an incomplete cycle also. I means totally that is not enters into an atmosphere. Some amount of the phosphorus is deposited on the earth's surface, so that here it is not enters into the atmosphere. From atmosphere again that is not enters into the living organisms. Not completely is not enters into the living organisms from the atmosphere to the living. When they are decomposed, some amount of the phosphorus is presenting in the form of the sedimentary rocks, and also that will be deposited in the form of the earth crust in the form of bones or teeth. These will be decomposed. These are presenting where this cannot be decomposed, so that will remains in the form of these. And these phosphorus is mainly presenting in the nucleic acids. Here it is mainly present in nucleic acids as well as ATP, energy resources like GTP. In these forms the phosphorus will be mainly presenting, and also in animals. Here in animals this is presenting in the form of teeth. In animals this form of teeth or bones, or the bones, these are presenting in the form of teeth or bones. These are presenting, and also here this will be remains in animals with bones and shells also. These are deposited. So here this will be decomposes. When this decomposing here, that will be taken place in the form of phosphatases. That means reservoir of pool of phosphorus is a rock which contains phosphorus in the form of phosphatases. These are presenting, and also here during weathering of the rock, during weathering of rocks, during the weathering of the weathering of rocks. Here some amount of phosphorus, phosphorus is dissolved in the soil solution and absorbed by the roots by the plants. That means by weathering of the soil, here absorbed by the plants, and some will be deposited in the form of the sedimentary structures or sedimentar, or in the form of sedimentary rocks. This will be deposited, so that this cycle will be the waste product and dead organisms are decomposed by the phosphorus, solubles by the phosphorus. That means when the organisms are died, the plants and animals are died, here some will be entered into the atmosphere, and remaining some will be deposited, very less amount of will be deposited in the form of teeth, bones or shells, or in the form of sedimentary layers. In the deeper oceans, these are formation is taken place, so that here completely that is not entered into the atmosphere, only some amount will be deposited in the form of the teeth, bones or shells, or in the form of sedimentary layers in the deeper oceans, so that here the phosphorus we can call as an incomplete cycles. So this is the two cycles, one is carbon and the carbon and the phosphorus cycles. The cycles is not drawn by me. Why means here it takes a little bit of time in the diagrammatic, so that here in the textbook we are given the carbon and the phosphorus cycle. These two cycles are very important in examinations. That is in carbon and phosphorus cycle. Explain the cycle of carbon and the phosphorus cycle. That is very important. And coming to the last one, that is the ecosystem services and ecosystem services. Ecosystem services. So here what are an ecosystem services means, here the services which is the products of ecosystem, the products of an ecosystem processes, the products of an ecosystem processes is known as the ecosystem. As that means what are the products which are obtained from an ecosystem, such we can call as an ecosystem services. So in this ecosystem we can able to produce the healthy forest ecosystem, purified the air and water. That means first one here, healthy ecosystem, a healthy forest ecosystem. A forest ecosystem will produce the air and the water. Here we can able to produce a fresh amount of air is produced from the ecosystem, as well as here we are able to produce the water also. And second one is here migrant drafts and a flood. Migrant a draft and it reduces here due to the ecosystem. Here the reduce draft and floods. It reduces the draft and the floods. And third one, if you see in here, the cyclic nutrients as well as the generate fertile soils. Here, the third one is cyclic nutrients. The cyclic nutrients, and here we produce fertile soil. That means due to the ecosystem we can able to get the nutrients are cycling will be taken place. Due to the cycling, here we can be able to get a fertile soil also will be produces, and also here will maintains the biodiversity. Here the fifth one is the maintains the biodiversity. Here it helpful for the maintenance of the biodiversity will be maintains, and also pollinated crops, and also here sixth one is the pollinated crops. Here we can able to maintain the biodiversity, means species maintenance will be taken place due to an ecosystem, and also the pollinated crops will be maintained. Why means here if ecosystem is presenting, here the transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of the flower is taken place, so that here we can able to get a pollination will be taken place by the plants, as well as the animals will get sufficient amount of food materials by the plants. That is, animals will provide food materials, will get the food materials by the plants, and also if you take a provide stages for site of carbon, and also this is the site for it is also the site for the carbon. And lastly, if it taken place, these ecological services are helpful for an aesthetic as well as culture, and also these are having a spiritual values are presenting, and aesthetic will having these ecological service provides aesthetic, culture and spiritual values will be maintained by the spiritual values will be maintained, that is producing of healthy forest ecosystem, that is air and water, reduces the droughts and floods, the cyclic nutrients are taken place, producing of fertile soils, maintenance of biodiversity and pollinated crops, as well as sites for the carbon to produce more amount of carbon. When carbon is more is produced, here the plants can able to get the more amount of carbon, so that they can able to prepare their own food materials and provides the food materials for all the living organisms, directly or indirectly. And lastly, they provides the aesthetic, a culture and a spiritual values are produced due to an ecological services. So this is the topic of an ecosystem. So in a next class we'll discuss that is the biodiversity and its conservation. We'll discuss in the next class.